Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Lost Series. I call it the Lost Series because if you remember back earlier in the year, I started a series called the Dashboard Hunting Mentor Series. And this is for new hunters. It was for new hunters. I'd recorded a few episodes, and if you've been kind of following along in the show, you'd know that I had a laptop burn in a truck fire, and on that laptop was a bunch of these audio recordings where they were not yet backed up to the cloud, and so I lost like 3 episodes. So what we're doing now is we're going to revive it. I've got my friend Rodger Holscher on the line here. He's been on the show many times. How many times have you been on? 2 or 3 times, Rodger?
Yeah, I was on once with Dennis Stokes, and then the other one was just a solo episode early this spring.
That's right.
After bear season.
Yeah, after bear season, you got that big old bear, and I want to talk about your season a little bit, and then jump into a line of questioning that the listeners sent in for us, and kind of what I thought is once we get to that point, I'll read the question, and if I have any input, I'll answer it, and you answer it, but mainly it's you that these folks are counting on. So without further ado, let me kick this episode off. Guys, welcome back to the Hunting Dashboard Mentor Series. Actually, I said that backwards, didn't I, Rodger? The Dashboard Hunting Mentor Series. Let's do it. There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive, and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Clark Fork, Idaho. And as I said in the intro there, this is the next installment of the Dashboard Hunting Mentor Series with my pal, Rodger Holscher. Rodger, thanks for joining me, brother. Can you hear me okay, Rodger?
Yep, I'm good.
I missed you there, so let's see. There, now I'm tracking. Now I got you. Was that my phone or what?
I don't know. If we keep having some problems, I might try a different audio system going on here.
Well, now you sound good. Now you sound good, but it was totally blanked out there because I'm like, hey, how's it going? And then nothing was there. So, whatever, man. I'm just going to keep it in there. We'll roll with it, dude.
That works.
I have no shame. I let people know right off the bat that I'm a disaster with this audio stuff. So
it's authentic.
It is. It's very authentic. I appreciate you saying that, man. I need the support, man. I appreciate you joining me for another episode. You've had
you having me.
You've had a heck of a season, man. I mean, like, did you leave any mule deer for the rest of us?
Yeah. I was trying to fill 2 bear tags instead of 2 deer tags, but
yeah. Well, I'll
settle for that buck.
Hey, yeah, I'd settle for that buck any day of the week, man. If you guys don't know, jump on Instagram and go to @backcountry Yabba Gabba, right? What? God, I always have a hard time with it.
Baba Yaga, BABAYAGA, but an underscore in between both of those.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes, but you guys got to go check that out and follow Rodger because A, he's a wealth of information, B, he's a solid hunter, and C, he got one hell of a buck. Not to mention the bear. That's what we had Rodger on last summer to talk about his bear that he got here in Idaho, and then now we're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about this mule deer, man. I kind of want to hear the story. I haven't heard the story.
No, I appreciate it. The late season hunt one or the general season hunt one?
That big one. Which big one?
Yeah, that was the November hunt I had here in southwest Idaho.
Yeah, the recent one.
Yeah, that's gosh, I mean, the Idahoans are gonna not like this story much. But I've been here for 4 years now, and in that time, I've drawn 2 once-in-a-lifetime deer tags.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you guys have any notion of going after Rodger with a pitchfork, keep in mind he is a cop and he's ready.
Oh man, I got to give this last one to the Eastman Tag Hub thing. I was on there before the draw season, was looking up stuff, and I was like, there's a good trophy forecast in this unit. So I figured I'd throw my hat in the ring for it, and it worked out really well. I've been putting in for sheep the last couple of years with a buddy of mine, and this year he had a baby in July, so we weren't going to be able to give sheep hunting a whole lot of time if we had drawn a good sheep tag. So I decided to put in for deer tag, and ended up drawing it. Actually, I think I was in a theater watching Top Gun, the new Top Gun, when the draw results came out, and I just about yelled out loud in the middle of the theater.
Really? You went and saw it in the theater, even?
Yeah. I think that's the first time I've been to the theater since the whole China virus thing.
Yeah, I haven't been to a movie theater in like a decade. What?
Yeah.
What was that movie? I haven't seen the new Top Gun. Is it pretty good?
Yeah. It's worth seeing for sure.
Is it?
Most of the time, I usually let movies come out on DVD, or I guess not even DVD anymore, whatever the streaming services are.
Yeah.
But this one I decided to go see because I had some buddies that saw it and said it was real good. But anyway, so I draw this tag, and it's a November tag, which I still have mixed emotions about it because everybody loves hunting the rut, and it's a rut tag, but it left me feeling like I was kind of half-assing it because I've been in this unit a lot. I've had a buddy of mine I work with drew the trophy bull tag in that unit a couple years ago, and then Chris's grandpa drew that unit last year for a bull tag, and so we've been in that unit a lot, and I've been in that unit a lot anyway, so I know it pretty well. But still, I hate not scouting for a deer tag and all that. But being that it was a November tag, there's August hunt in there that goes all the way through September, a bunch of antelope hunting in there, general deer, elk, everything to get to this tag. And so, me putting eyes on deer in August or July isn't going to do me a whole lot of good come November.
Yeah, for sure. And I
just kind of felt
just to clarify, this is mule deer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just, as seasons progressed and it was getting closer, I spent more time getting my weapon system dialed and my loads dialed, and did a lot of practicing with that to make sure I was ready for that stuff, that side of things. But I always felt like I wasn't doing that tag a good service just because I hadn't been putting a lot of time scouting and doing all that stuff. But
scouting wise, you found this tag by using Eastman's Tag Hub?
Yeah, I had the unit south of it for that first tag I drew up here. So I always kind of knew about the unit, but being the first year that I put in for a deer tag in a couple years, I went through the Tag Hub stuff and was looking at the forecast of the different units and draw odds and proximity to where I live, and just trying to get something that would be doable, good trophy forecast, and pretty it's not great odds of drawing it, but I figured it was like, why not throw a Hail Mary out there? It's supposed to be a good trophy forecast year, so
yeah, heck
I let it have it.
So,
so
that as a third party guy, because I talk about Eastman's Tag Hub quite a bit, and I not too much time, but what's your thought? Did it do what you felt like you paid for, and get your money's worth out of the Tag Hub?
Yeah, oh yeah, every year I subscribe to the Tag Hub stuff on the Eastman's. I get both regular rifle journal and the bow hunting journal.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I ended up buying their mule deer class, their online course.
Yeah.
There's just because there's how much information is out there on podcasts and everything else there's a lot of information about August, September, October deer hunting, but the more I was looking into the rut hunting stuff, there's not a whole lot of that kind of information out there because there's not a whole lot of tags given for rut. So
I was gonna say that's the I think limitation would be a smaller audience because it's super limited for November hunting for mule deer. But man, it's worth it. I've done one of those and it was awesome.
This is the second one I've done, and if I had to choose, I would still rather do early season over rut. I don't know, and people are gonna hate me for saying that, but I just feel that being able to. I guess growing up, where I hunted in northeastern California, it was archery in August. We had 23-day seasons, and it was in August and the beginning of September. So they were velvet muleys and hatch groups of muleys, and that's just kind of what I grew up knowing. And I think it's easier for me to find deer during that time of the year because I've got more experience hunting that time of the year. And I'm not a cold weather hunter. I can admit that one.
A fair weather guy, huh?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be fair weather, but I like to spend all day out in the woods and not, a couple hours in the morning, go back to camp, warm up,
Yeah.
And it's just a lot easier to do that when it's warmer than freezing your butt off.
Yeah, for sure.
And I lost a day and a half because of the snow, which is, it's pros and cons, but the snow in this unit was hard because it's so broken up, sage and juniper. Everyone's like, oh man, they're going to pop out there. Everything looked, and I guess I'm probably used to spotting mule deer by their color and, the white ass, on the hillside. Right. And when everything is the same color as they are and white, now unless they're moving, it's real hard to pick them apart in that kind of broken snow, rocky juniper country, sage country. So, I guess I've just geared more towards the early season, bachelor groups, high country.
Yeah, they both have different things that they offer, and I would probably tend to agree with when we're talking about mule deer. But up north, Idaho wise, man, it's hard to top this November whitetail rut hunt. I mean, it's a ball, man. And I honestly, I had a great year season wise. I filled my last tag on a little 4-point whitetail on this late archery hunt, and God, it was just fun, man. Hunting in seriously 3.5 feet of snow. I went in on snowshoes. I used snowshoes, and packing that sucker out was a bitch.
Man.
But it was just, I don't know. There's something about it that I really, really like, and so. But when it comes to mule deer, I don't know. I'd probably tend to agree with you. I think that late summer, early fall, high country mule deer hunt, there's something nostalgic about that, and that time of year. That's what we think of, That's that western. Yeah. That's that western hunt, what comes to mind is that high country mule deer hunt, and I just, it's tough to beat.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is just, like I said, I know where to look for them.
Mm-hmm.
I know I can scout easy and go, this drainage, it's got this, what I'm looking for, and a drainage, it's got all this stuff, and then I can go there and generally find them. And when it's rut, it's just roll the dice, trying to find the pockets of does, and which has ended up what killed this buck. But it's just and I've only hunted, this is my second year hunting a rut tag. And so I guess I just don't have the long experience doing it to say I'd rather do that than an early season tag. But
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for velvet bucks too, though.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about that, those fuzzy antlers. But
It's so funny, man, because it's like one of those things where if I was hunting a velvet buck, I would be, it would be like one of those things where, you know, oh, that's a super big deal to me. That's what's important to me right now. You know, because, I guess where I'm going with it is I've noticed that things that I thought I was more passionate about than other things, such as hunting a high country velvet antlered buck, versus like a high country hard horned, you know, October mule deer, versus hunting September elk versus hunting spring bear, you know, all these things. What I found is my thing is whatever tag I have and whatever season is open. You know what I mean? Like, I love all of it. I love all of it. And I wish I could just say I had one thing, but I just don't, man. Especially, man, spring bear is really, and we talked about this last time we were on the show.
Yeah.
It's really creeping up there.
You know, and we are both blessed to be in Idaho because of the amount of tags that we can get for the different species.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, growing up in California, it was, you got one deer tag, maybe two. Elk, antelope were all once in a lifetime. Bear, towards, you know, I think 2012 was when they outlawed bear hunting with dogs. And so it was kind of more of a target of opportunity if you had a bear tag in your pocket while you were deer hunting, you know, and saw one close enough. But so it was strictly like I pretty much lived the year for those 23 days during end of August and September. And I never did any mule deer hunting in October. I filled three deer tags during October, but that was over the course of, I don't know, 18 years or something, whatever. So I did most of it in archery. Yeah, so that was my thing if you would have asked me that. But then since being up here, like we've talked, man, that spring bear hunting's got me going.
Yeah.
And I think I would rather do that over anything if you had to nail me down to one. But,
dude, you need to come up north with me and spring bear hunt over bait, man. It is something
dude,
else. It is something else. I mean, just watching all these different bears come in on the bait and, you know, wrestling with the barrel and trying to scare the other bears away. And it just watching the behavioral side of these bears during spring bear over bait, man, it's such a unique experience. It's such a unique experience.
And I would absolutely love that because I did a lot of ground blind hunting in California. I mean, that's predominantly what you did was sit a ground blind over water or a tree stand over a water hole.
Yeah.
Especially in the years that it was droughty and hot. And so I could sit in a ground blind for 14 hours a day and be fine. Some guys are like, dude, I can't do this. You know, after 2 hours, they get fidgety.
Yeah. I max out about 4 hours. I really do.
Yeah.
I max out at about 4 hours. And 2 hours, dude, a few years ago was pushing it for me, but switching to this whole November whitetail thing we were just talking about, that has built my stamina for a ground blind. But
now, were you guys kind of sitting on travel corridors, trails in ground blinds, or how were you guys doing that?
Yeah, for November?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I know where the does go, and I know in November where the does are. The bucks are going to be there. It was a pretty skinny season this year in terms of what bucks were available. In fact, during November, the biggest whitetail buck that I saw was actually when I took my daughter out, and he came into some grunts. I was using that new grunt tube by Phelps, and he came in just, you know, huffing and puffing and stomping his foot, and he was raking some brush. And I thought he was going to kind of come out to my right a little bit. It's really hard to explain the terrain. It was really weird side hill setup we had, but we were sitting in a ground blind, me and my daughter. And it was starting to get dark, but this big sucker comes out to the left, and I didn't know he was there until he like kind of wheezed, and he stomps his foot and he's staring in our direction, looking for this buck that's grunting at him. And I turned around, I told my daughter, I'm like, Shiloh, there's a huge buck right there. And he was a big buck, man. For if somebody's listening in like Kansas, this is not going to be like a super impressive buck for you. But for a North Idaho, public land whitetail buck, this was a great buck. And he comes out, and my daughter, like, he's close enough that we have to be pretty, cautious sound wise. She grabs, she lifts the rifle and gets this thing in the scope. And right as she's taking it off safety, he bolts. And, it was, dude, I didn't sleep for like 3 nights over this, but it was just awesome. When I say it was a skinny season, I didn't see a lot of big shooter, monster whitetails like, that I think I had in the past, not that I'm like a big trophy hunter. In fact, the buck I ended up shooting, during late archery, which is actually still going on, he's just a little 4-point, one of those basket bucks, but I was happy because I'm
hey, man.
just,
heck yeah.
I'm over it, man. Just needed meat in the freezer.
Anything you shoot with a bow is a trophy in my book.
Yeah,
it
for
is
sure.
so hard to do that.
Yeah, for sure. But, other than that, it was a lot of fun. Lots of action in terms of small bucks coming in to grunts and bleats. And only one responded to the rattles, but that's what's fun about the whitetail hunt is you could do all these different sounds and try all these different techniques. And, it's just a lot of fun. Anyway, I got us off course there.
Yeah, right. I love it.
So, well, I want to start, since we are on the Dashboard Hunting Mentor series. That is a quite a tongue twister there when I try to say that too fast. So,
yeah.
And I've had a couple people ask me, why do you call it the Dashboard Hunting Mentor series? Because most people, folks, listen to podcasts while they're driving. And so it's like, I'm coming right out of the speakers in the dashboard, and we're talking about, how to get started in hunting. And so the Dashboard Hunting Mentor series is really geared towards people that are just getting into hunting or only have a couple of years experience, and they're just looking for like the basics to make them, take them from it taking 5 years to figure something out, like a concept, to figuring it out, within their first season or two. And that's kind of the idea with this series. It's great for youth hunters or anything else like that. So I want to start. You're the first actual guest, Rodger, that I've had on for this series. Usually I just do this alone. And so this is really cool because, as I explained to you, you're an expert. I consider you an expert in like gear. I consider you an expert when it comes to long range shooting or optics and dialing in your weapon and being proficient and lethal with your weapon, whether it's a bow or a rifle. You're just a solid guy and like just super dependable. If you've got a tag in your pocket, that something's going to die. And that's why I like having somebody like you on, for this series. And so with all that said, I want to ask you to respond to like, let's say that we have got some folks out there that have never actually been hunting, but here it's December and they have made the decision that in the year 2023, they are going to become active tag holding hunters. And I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but what would you say the top 3 things in order for these hunters to be successful or fairly successful? And by saying that, I'm defining success as you get something in return from your hunt, whether that is just a fulfillment and a good time, and you see some wildlife, you have a great camp, you just have a great overall experience, or if you define success as an actual notch tag at the end of your hunt. That is up to you as a new hunter to determine. But what would you say, Rodger, would be like 3 things that somebody needs to really focus on, because fall is, it seems like it's a long way off, but it'll be here before we know it. For somebody going out for the first time in the fall of 2023, that they should really focus on in the next 6, 7, 8 months.
Now we we talking more kind of gear stuff, or are we talking just
No, not
in
not quite.
general?
We'll get to the gear stuff. I'm talking about
Okay.
in general, in terms of
Just focusing
proficiency
on. Okay.
as a
Yep.
hunter. What is going to keep them safe? What is going to make them have a good experience? What is going to make them successful or lead to their success? Those kind of things.
Yeah. First thing I would say is knowledge. Man, you can't put a price on that stuff. Whether it's going to, like, Brian Lambert's has got his Western hunting summits.
Mm-hmm.
The Eastmans, they do all these seminars at a lot of these shows, like going to the seminars, going to these classes, and soaking up as much of that knowledge as you can, reading the Eastman's journals, because there's so much in those things.
Can I ask
like we
you
talked about? Yeah.
a question on that? When,
Sure.
because you mentioned you'd gone through the Eastman's mule deer course. Is,
Yes.
in your opinion, because I have an opinion too, I won't share that yet, but in your opinion, would somebody that has never been hunting get some value in that course, or do you think that course might be a little bit over their head?
I think there's probably parts that they might not understand right away, but when they get to a situation, they'll go, I remember he talked about this,
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll click, because certain things you just got to experience. But it's all having that knowledge in the bank for when you get into these situations. You'll go, I remember this. This is what it said, or this is what they talked about. Because you can't, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. There's so much knowledge and information in it that that's something that you keep on going through. You don't just do the course once and got it and you're good to go. Like, keep going through it, because you'll pick up on different things, and the more you hunt, the more you experience other things. Certain things will just be kind of stored in your I got this bank, and other ones you'll have to think about. And so the more you kind of experience it and the more you listen to it, the more it just kind of sinks in, and you don't have to think about things. Like, I don't even have to stop to think about, okay, what do I have to do? Like, I know I have to check the wind all the time. It's just something I routinely do, just because I've done it so much and heard it talked about so much and everything. So, like, that's one of those things that I don't have to think about. But when it comes to elk hunting, I'm very novice at elk hunting, so there's different things I have to stop and think about. And that's listening to the podcasts and all the seminars and your School of September series and all these things that I download them on. I listen to the same ones. I download them. I listen to them in elk camp, like at night before I go to sleep. Like, I'll just turn on one of your episodes.
I do that too.
Listen to it. just to when you're solo, there's a lot of dead air. And so I'll sit there and listen to that stuff and fall asleep, and they're just keeping all that information fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah, I would say definitely the knowledge. You can't put a price on it necessarily. Like, you could go out and buy, this whiz bang whatever, and and it's got a price to it, but you can't really put. And then everybody thinks about, say, the Western Hunting Summit. Brian Barney's up there, and mule deer is his thing, elk's his thing. I mean, everything's his thing, but you can't put a price on it. But everybody looks at the price tag that Lampert's has on his website for that, and they go, "Oh man, that's expensive." Well, when you break it down and look what you're getting, you're probably going to save that money in not buying gear that you shouldn't have bought, and then buy gear that you should have bought later and wasting the money on the gear that you shouldn't have bought. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. So,
you're saving that money because you're getting great info from guys right off the bat, and being able to see their equipment and do all this stuff, instead of going, yeah, I saw this once on this YouTube, whatever, I think I'll try it. And then you get it and you're like, oh, this doesn't work for me, or whatever. And I got multiple totes I'm looking at right now in my garage that is a testament to that.
Yeah. We both.
I buy a lot of gear, and I got a lot of stuff that I don't use anymore.
You are kind of a gear junkie, aren't you?
Yeah. So, I could have saved a lot of money
Yeah.
if I had, that resource back when I first started,
So knowledge, I think you nailed it, man. I think that is if I were listing out my top three, I think knowledge would be the number one. And I agree with your assessment on that, like the Eastman's mule deer course. I think if somebody that's never been in the West on a mountain pursuing mule deer, if they took the course and they retained 10% of the information in that course, they would be way ahead of hunters that have been doing it for like 5 or 6 years. And
Yep.
and so you don't have to retain everything. You just have to retain enough to be successful. And so, yeah, no, that's great, man. So knowledge is one.
And diversifying the knowledge, right? Don't just, you listen to one podcast, one guy, Robbie Denning. I mean, dude knows mule deer like no other. But, I listen to him. I also listen to Brady Miller and Brian Barney and, all these guys, Ryan Lampert's, like, they all have different outlooks on how you hunt them. I mean, they got similarities, but they also have their own unique things that you're like, oh, I'm going to hang on to that one. No, I'm going to hang, Scott Reekers, Todd Helms, like all these guys, they just, Dan Picard, like I could just go on, but they all have their own uniqueness to them that might fit your style. So don't just get sucked into one person's opinion. And I should have probably caveated that. This is the world according to Rodger. So this is not gospel, but diversifying your knowledge and getting it from multiple different sources is always a good option.
And so, and I really like your theory that if they do choose just one podcast to listen to, it's the Western Huntsman, right? That's what you texted earlier.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I said.
Pretty sure you sent me a letter saying that, something.
Notarized letter.
Okay, so knowledge being one, what would you say number two would be?
Proficiency with your weapon. And that's probably going to go against the grain on some people. Most people are probably going to say fitness. I am not in the best shape. I'm not out of shape, but I'm not in shape, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense to me, man.
Proficiency with the weapon system, I could get up and down the mountain. My hunting buddy, Chris Young, he is going to beat me up there 10 out of 10 times. Mm-hmm. But when I get to the top of that thing, my bullet can fly a lot faster than his legs can. So I'll shoot something out from underneath him because I can shoot further than he can.
Yeah.
But it comes down to that. A lot of, I would say the majority of my success is because of my proficiency with my weapons, and whether that's archery or rifle. I think a lot of guys kind of back themselves into a corner when it comes to their capable, effective range.
Yeah, sure.
Mostly with archery too. Guys are like, man, if it's over 40 with a bow, I'm just not going to shoot at it. Jim, I don't know. I'd have to really think about the last time, besides elk, that I shot at something with a bow that was under 40 yards. Most of the time,
mule deer country. That happened to me this week. But different situation. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think that's going to be super dependent on geographically where you're hunting,
100%, yep.
and it's going to be dependent on whether or not you're calling in a screaming, rutted up bull elk, or if you're hunting deer, or there's because I couldn't agree more, man. That's actually one of my goals for this year, and it's going to feed into some of the questions the listeners sent in for you tonight. Is going to be this weapons proficiency, but my goal this year is to be comfortable going from, because right now I generally won't shoot anything over 50 yards, and I want to push that to like 75. And I think that with the equipment that we have today, I don't think that's out of line. I really don't.
No,
and so, we all know. I know there's going to be some of those old school folks that are going to, gripe about me saying that. But I just want to I had a couple of great elk opportunities this year where I did everything right in terms of calling or locating an elk and calling an elk in and getting him close and all this kind of stuff, playing the wind right. But he was just out of my comfort range of 50 yards. You know, maybe I had one that was like 63 yards. And Rodger, I almost pulled the trigger on that on my release. But I don't know, something was nagging at me. And what's funny is the next time I took a shot, I deflected a dang arrow off this teeny little branch and ruined the shot anyway. Yeah. Anyway, beside the point. So I love that answer. And I think that honestly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm glad you brought up it depends geographically, right? Because up there in northern Idaho, you're really compact areas, timber, like you're not down here where I hunt, like it's easily you're able to shoot 1,000 yards in most cases just because of the topography. But up there, it's different. So the proficiency with a weapon for someone like you is going to be different than, it might not necessarily be, see if you could get down prone within 15 seconds, dial elevation on your scope and send around in 15 seconds. Like, it might be, carrying your rifle on your side and how quickly you're able to get that rifle shouldered off of safety, acquire a target, and be able to press off an accurate shot. Because that might be more important to you, hunting that thick timber country than being able to shoot 600, 700, 800 yards.
Yeah.
So it's totally, I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I wanted to make mention. But,
well, and, for a guy like me, it is very, very rare in North Idaho to be in a scenario where you're going to be shooting 700 yards. It's just, it's right now. I'm not saying nothing I say on this show, folks, by the way, means that I mean that as some literal thing that is true 100% of the time. So
there's no absolutes.
There's no absolutes. I know up in Unit 1 that yes, you can get 1,000-yard shots. I'm well aware. I've hunted up there too. So I don't need the reminder. I'm talking just generally speaking. Where I'm at are going to be, maybe 400, maybe 500 yards at the most. However, that said, I want to be proficient because I want to go to southern Idaho and hunt mule deer. Or what if I want to go to Wyoming and hunt mule deer? What if I want to go to Arizona? Yeah, all these other western states where these long ranges are total reality. So I'm digging this, man.
And if you set yourself up to shoot 800, 900, 1,000, then those 400 or 500 yard shots just seem like just chip shots, right? They're gimmies. So that's same with you shooting. You want to up your range with your archery equipment this year. If you're shooting at 75, 80 yards practicing, and you get something at 50 or 63 next year, you're going to be like, oh man, I got this one.
Yep.
So it's, just because I shoot at these kind of what would seem to some people as absurd distances doesn't mean I'm going to take a shot at a living animal all the time at that. But my weapon system, I make sure has the capabilities of that, along with myself as a shooter, that if something happens and if I had to get another round in a wounded animal or something, I would have the ability to do that efficiently and accurately.
I dig it, man. So we've got knowledge on what you're hunting in terms of species and all that kind of other stuff. Proficiency with your weapon. Do you have a number 3 or?
I would say probably fitness on top of that. Either fitness or just being prepared to spend some money on gear and don't skimp. I'm a big buy once, cry once kind of a guy. After years of I could get by with this cheaper stuff. So,
well, I mean, have you ever just bought a roll of duct tape and called it good, man? I mean, what are you talking about?
Dude, I've Jimmy rigged some stuff in my day, but it's you don't appreciate good gear a lot of the times unless you've suffered through some bad gear.
Yeah.
And you buy a crappy pair of boots, you throw a pair of Hoffmans or Crispies or Chamberlains on, and you're gonna be like, wow.
Yep.
You suffered through that hunting season with sore feet or whatever. and you didn't have if you would have just, spent an extra $100, So
And planning for that, I think, is key, because I think that's what,
yeah,
most people are cheapskates like me. And so you get up to hunting season, it's all of a sudden like, I'll use your Hoffman example, almost $400 for a pair of boots. And like, back in the day, my wife would have killed me if I spent that kind of money. But if I would have planned for it and bought them in April, then they're ready to go in the fall, right? I mean, it's
and
the planning.
Breaking them in and making sure.
Yeah. So plan for it. A lot of new hunters are younger, 20s, don't have a ton of expendable income. That planning is going to be huge. So, well, cool, man.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. If you had another thought.
I was just going to say a lot of those things, right? You can look at them as investments. They're multi-season investments instead of, I used to buy a new pair of boots pretty much every hunting season because I would wear them out or the soles would come apart or something would happen to them that I wouldn't be able to get multiple seasons out of them. So it's like, all right, you're going to spend, $150 a season on a pair of boots, or are you going to spend $400 on a pair of boots and have them for 4 or 5 seasons and be able to resole them and get, so much more life out of them. So
yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Just especially boots. Don't skimp on your boots.
Yes.
So we do have some gear questions coming up. You ready to go into some questions? I see you got some questions too, huh?
Yeah, I sent them over to you.
Okay, I'll pull those up in just a sec here. All right, so again, how this works, guys, for the listeners out there is when I'm doing an expert guest such as Rodger here, I'm going to post the day of recording to go ahead and send your questions in. And the reason I do that, because if I did it like 2 or 3 days before, so many people would see it and then that post would get lost. So I try to do it when it's all fresh in everybody's mind. I wasn't totally sure about saying last names, and so I just kind of am doing abbreviations for the last name. I can never make up my mind with that, if it's okay to do that or not, without permission or whatever. So just to be safe. Well, you're in law enforcement. Am I going to get arrested if I say people's last name?
No, that's all public information.
Okay, that's true. See, you heard it. You heard it, folks. Let's see. Questions. All right, pulled them up. This one is from Tony V. Love your show, man. I'm mainly a diehard bow hunter and know that I don't have a lot of confidence with a rifle. I'm applying for a rifle elk hunt next year. Any advice for transferring archery skills to rifle? I thought that was a pretty good question for you.
Yeah, that is a good one. Because I was like that for a long time. I mainly did archery and didn't really get into a whole lot of rifle stuff. I guess initially until the last 6 or 7 years, but it's all very similar. The trigger control, the breathing control, just and I'll caveat that if you could have bad habits shooting a bow, I did. I had some of the worst target panic imaginable, and then you're also able to transfer that target panic over into rifle or pistol shooting. And so if you got bad habits with archery, try to get those fixed, and that'll also carry over to rifles. So like being able to be comfortable with the wobble zone, because it's usually magnified when you're looking through an optic, and so you're like, holy crap, I'm wobbling all over the place because you can see it. And so this is another reason I like to tell people to kind of tone down the power on their scope. You don't have to shoot a deer at 400 yards at 25 power. Zip that sucker down to 10, and you're going to see less wobble, which is going to cause less anxiety. But training, I'm looking at it right now. I was doing some before we started. There's several different indoor dry fire training systems. A lot of them have like a lens that goes on the ocular or objective lens on the rifle scope. And it lets you focus your parallax down to like 12 feet is what mine is. It's from DTS Precision or DST Precision.
Is that the one you talked about this last summer when we hit?
The DFAT system. And so you're able to get so many trigger presses and so many reps doing, build and break, positional shooting, or different things, running your gun without the flinch and the recoil and the expenditure, because we all know how expensive ammunition is. I'd love to tell you to buy 600, 700, 800 rounds of ammunition and go out and shoot it before the season starts, but that's not practical for a lot of people. But you could sit in your garage at night and get 100 presses off on a trigger and be able to see, these targets are scaled to where they're life-size scale. I got one. I'll have to send you a picture of it, but it's got deer, elk, antelope, I think moose, caribou, maybe a bear. I can't remember. I don't think it's a bear on there, but they're scaled to certain distances because, an average sized deer will look, this big, whether it's, through a scope, 3 MOA or whatever at a certain yardage. And so they scale them on this picture. So you're looking at this picture. It's on an 8x11 sheet of paper, and it looks like there's all these little miniature animals on there. But when you look at them through a scope, you're able to see, okay, in this position I'm building, what's my wobble zone? Am I able to keep those crosshairs within my acceptable hit range, circumference, whatever, within that animal from this position? Okay, no, I'm not. All right. Build my position differently to where I'm comfortable doing it. And then that way, okay, at certain yardages, I won't be steady enough to shoot at X amount of yards. I'll have to get seated, whatever. And so you don't try it right off the bat. It's not like, oh, there's a deer at 800 yards. I'm going to try standing off a tripod. It's doable, but if you've never tried it and you waste all that time trying to get set up standing, you're like, wow, I'm all over the place. And then have to break your position down and try to get seated or, even prone, when automatically I'm not able to get that steady. I can get lower and steadier. So there's so much, and it's cheap. It's $150, I think, for the setup. And
which is what, like a box and a half of ammo nowadays?
Yeah, I mean legit. And you're gonna
in Biden's America,
you're gonna waste that, and I love spending money on ammo or reloading stuff, but you're gonna save yourself so much money getting these systems and just practicing with them.
Yeah,
because just this year with my dad's bear, my bear, his deer, my bucks, both of them, like, they were all really quick situations where I practiced how quick and how steady I can get in those. We're not sitting there and we got 10 minutes to build a perfect shooting platform and bring a bunch of backpacks over. Like, these are hasty positions that you got to get into right now. And without the practice of doing those, you're just not going to be as efficient. And these are the times when you could say, okay, my body position's off. I got to make sure I score up to the rifle and whatnot. So,
yeah.
Man, I forget where that question was going. I just kind of went off on a tangent.
Basically transferring, it sounds like he's confident with a bow, but he's not super confident with a rifle, and he's going to go on a rifle elk hunt next year and just I think you actually nailed it. The bad habits, like you were talking about, if you get, for example, target panic with a bow, you're going to get it with a rifle. If you don't get over that prior to either switching or prior to that season opening, and what Rodger's explaining is the training is what's going to make a difference. You can't get, let's say you go out and buy a new rifle in August and your hunt starts in October and you go to the range 3 times, you're not going to be super confident, and you're probably going to miss unless it's a real easy shot. You really do have to put in the time. And that system, that DTS system, is that what it's called? DTS?
DST, but it's called a DFATS. If you Googled like DFATS, it's the
I did.
dry fire. Gosh, I forget what DFATS stands for. But there's one that's called the IDTS, Indoor Dry Fire Training System.
I actually have it all saved.
If you just Google it,
I have it all saved from last time we talked because I was going to order it, and it's just it doesn't make sense to order it just yet until I have the house built. So, because I'm going to have a perfect spot for that. So anyway, All right, next question.
Yeah.
This comes from Brett W. Hey, Jim, a friend of mine sent me your School of September series to listen to like 2 years ago. Been hooked ever since. Hey, thanks, brother. Brett, by the way, School of September, we're going to start that off in a couple months here. All right, so his question is, how realistic is it for a guy from Tennessee who has only hunted whitetail and ducks to make a solo trip to Idaho to hunt elk? This would be a rifle hunt. I'm comfortable to 300 yards and have never been to Idaho. You spelled that wrong, Brett. Do I even have a shot at seeing an elk? Sorry, it's hard for me to read that. So I don't want you to ever share this information, Rodger, but I'm pretty sure I'm to the point where I need reader glasses. So it's really frustrating, man.
I'm a terrible reader, so I'm glad you didn't have me reading this.
So basically, is it realistic for a guy from Tennessee who's only hunted whitetail and ducks to make a trip to Idaho, solo even, for a rifle hunt? And do I even have a shot at seeing an elk? Why don't you take that one first? I'd like to answer that one too.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your take on it, because I did it this year. I went out archery solo. And that was super daunting, because I killed my first elk a couple of years ago. So I still remember the sheer size of those animals and how hard it was with two people to cut it up and pack it out. And so just thinking about it solo it was weighing on me every day. I was a legit thought in my head every day.
Yeah.
So, but it's doable, but you got to really understand what you're doing, because I don't want you to shoot an elk and then walk up to it and go, oh my gosh, I've never done the gutless method. How do I get this off of the mountain? I've never phoned out an animal. How do I lighten this load so I can get it off? Because you run a real good chance, depending on where you go, of hurting yourself or wasting that animal because you're not able to get it out, or you try to get it out too fast and hurt yourself in the process.
Yeah.
But the 300-yard effective range for the rifle can easily be extended, with the training, the dry fire training systems, the setting up your rifle in a certain way that would make it easier to shoot at those longer distances. Because nowadays we got good bullets, we got good cartridges, we got good weapon systems, we got good optics that are more than capable. I guess the limitations to a lot of these systems nowadays is the shooter.
Yeah.
And so if they could work on themselves and getting that proficiency up, the bullets, the weapon systems, everything's capable of 100% capable of further stuff, especially with rangefinders and everything, and all the apps that have, Hornady Ford off. Like, you can get that on your phone for free in an app, and it's stupid accurate. So it's not 20 years ago when we didn't have rangefinders and it was like, how far is that deer look to you, Jim? I don't know, about 300 yards. Cool, I'm holding the hair. That's why a lot of these people have those limitations on 300 yards, because they can take their 7 rem mag, zero it for 1.5 inches high at 100, and you're holding the hair up to 3. And so I think that's where a lot of these people put these limitations on themselves in their platforms, just because of that. But it's doable. I would make sure, like we talked about, do the School of September, do your research, because if you do, I just don't want them to not be prepared. Especially, you're going to need certain size ice chests to get all that stuff back to Tennessee. How are you going to transport the meat? There's a lot of logistical things that he has to do. Personally, I'd like to see a guy for their first kind of Western backcountry type of a hunt come out and do a spring bear.
Yeah, get a feel for the land. It's not a terrible idea.
Yeah, 100%. You're practicing all the same stuff as far as the woodsmanship skills and everything like that. You don't necessarily, because the state of Idaho doesn't require it, you don't have to take the bear meat back. Although I really hope people do, because it's absolutely the delicious meat out there. So
highly recommend.
Yes.
5-star.
And it's cheaper, right? Especially if they get one of the reduced tags, it comes out to be like $230 for the license, the non-resident license, and the reduced bear tag.
Yeah.
And you're backcountry hunting in May, June, beautiful time of the year. And it's just a great way to get your feet wet for that type of a Western hunting. And you're not having to deal with the logistical stuff that comes with such a big creature like an elk. And you could do a solo bear hunt very easily, like a solo deer hunt. It's a lot easier to do those because of the size of the animal than a solo elk. You run into, and Jim, you're way more knowledgeable with this, so I'll let you talk about it, but it's so much harder to call elk solo. It's so much harder to do those types of things solo. But I'll let you take it from here. I talked enough.
Man, I like mule deer hunting. It's almost time, too. I look forward to mule deer hunting every single year. It's what I grew up on. That is not to say that I'm great at it, but now there's some really good resources available, and my favorite one is over at Eastman's Hunting Journals, where they have the mule deer course. This course has all sorts of digital information for you to go through as an e-course. It's got the basic safety, training and preparation, choosing a hunt, making a hunt plan, gear, scouting, glassing, field judging, rifle hunting, bow hunting, hunt strategy, harvest, the experience. All of it is right there in one spot for you to access and learn from some of the best like Dan Picard and Brian Barney. So up your mule deer hunting game by going to taghub.eastmans.com/courses/online mule deer course. You know what? Just look up Eastman's Hunting Journals and you'll find it. It's super easy. Let them know I sent you. You won't regret it. Yeah, no, I'd like to for sure answer that, Brett. Is it, first of all, I'm going to break this question down just a little bit. Is it realistic for a guy from Tennessee who's only hunted whitetail and ducks to make a solo trip to Idaho and hunt elk? Obviously, yes, it's realistic. So I don't know, Brett, if you've already got a tag or not, but most of the tags are sold out at this point, but I think there's still a handful left here and there. So yes, is it realistic? Absolutely, man. It is as daunting as Rodger discussed, however, because I think that what I've found, because when I'm hunting in Idaho, this is my home state. I camp here, I work here, I live here, I'm in the woods all the time, I go fishing all over the place, I hunt the whole thing. Yeah, the way I could read the state and the way I could read a topo map, for example, is going to be way different than the way you're going to read it from Tennessee. Maybe if you've never been here, which I think he says he's never been to, like out west or to Idaho or whatever. Yeah. So Brett, what I'm saying is that would be the same situation as me trying to read the topography of Tennessee. It's going to look a lot different when I get there. Versus like you reading it because you live there, you kind of know how to read it a little bit better. It's the same kind of thing. So it's not that it's not doable or it's not realistic. You can absolutely do it. Do you want to pack into the backcountry and shoot an elk 10 miles back by yourself? No, man, you're going to ruin meat. The comfortable to 300 yards. I like what Rodger said on that. Do I even have a shot at seeing an elk? So that's up to you, man. Rodger, he mentioned calling in elk. You do need to be good at calling elk if you're hunting in September. If you're hunting rifle hunt, yeah, probably not as big of a deal. Just learn how to, cow call and whatnot. But there's a couple of really good resources. Rodger mentioned our September School of September. Actually, he mentioned it. He's the one that gave School of September a shout out. Yeah. So listen to that. My buddies, John Gabriel and Dan Staten over there created an online course similar to the Eastman's Mule Deer course we were talking about, and it's called the Elk Collective. And if you use my promo code, it's like $69, and it gives you access to over 150 videos of how to hunt elk. And so absolutely it's realistic. You just got to be realistic with what your expectations are and understand that it is really tough and it's really different than what Onyx looks like when you're, east scouting from the East Coast or back east or whatever. That would be my recommendation. But I would never.
Yeah, can I
Yeah, go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was just gonna kind of reiterate that. Being newer here to Idaho, I still get into some of this country where I'm like, holy cow, this looks a lot different than it did,
Oh,
on
absolutely.
Google Earth. And you just don't get the sheer magnitude. I mean, if somebody like sees Lampers and calls videos of them going into some of this country, um, or like people going into the Frank Church and hunting that, and they're like, oh man, I want to do that. And then the first time you step foot in the Frank Church wilderness, and you go, oh my gosh,
It's all
I
bigger.
just, I see, yeah, you could 100% guarantee that whatever you're looking at, and if you look at it on Google Earth, you go, man, that's pretty steep. It's going to be way steeper when you get in person.
Hmm.
And, resources like Mark Livesey's e-scouting course. I'm a subscriber to that, or I guess a member, or however you want to call it. That's a huge bonus on that one. But
Oh yeah, that's a good one, man. I forgot about that
it's
one.
just don't bite off more than you can chew. I just tell people that because you will absolutely ruin your experience coming out west if you come out here and have a miserable experience because you weren't prepared properly, or you didn't have, like you said, realistic expectations. And I forgot, he didn't say in that what his rifle was or what his cartridge was or setup. So
No.
um, part of my answer to that was, I guess, assuming that he had a weapon system that was carrying enough velocity and energy at those different distances. But I don't know, Tennessee, he might have a 30-30, open sights. Like, so,
Hey, now I've got one
kind
of
of on the
those.
weapon. Hey, I wish I had one of those. I've been looking to get something like that for a long time, and I just never have. But
So
I
I
definitely want
can
one of
I
those.
can I geek out on that for just a minute?
Do
Those
it, please.
those lever action the Model 94s. I love this
Mm.
rifle. I love these. When I say I love these rifles, if it were legal, I would marry this rifle. Okay, I love it.
It's
So
2022, Jim.
that's true. How do you identify? I mean, there's a
Yes.
lot of different ways to approach this. So, no,
Yes.
I do, man. I love this rifle, but what happened was my grandma passed away this last summer, and
Oh, man.
through the she's lived in the same house. She was 96 years old, been there forever. The point is, so the family's going through getting rid of stuff that's been in the house forever, and finds my grandpa's old hunting rifle, who he passed away 20 years ago. And I was able to take this rifle, and I got this rifle, and it is a Model 94 Winchester 3030, and it was one of the first. No, not the first. What year? Now I'm drawing a blank. I want to say it was manufactured around 1918.
Wow.
Based on the serial numbers, you could take the serial numbers and do a little homework and determine. And
Hmm.
I'm a dork when it comes to like antique weapons and stuff like that. So I determined this rifle is over 100 years old, and I shot it. And I actually shot a. Well, I'm not going to say what I shot with it, but it took down some wild game this year, which was quite awesome.
That's
With my
awesome.
grandpa's gun. And this thing, I mean, I just had to throw that out there. I love it. I should send you a picture of it. It's super cool. It needed a good cleaning, but it
Please
shoots.
do. I really like those rifles.
Yeah, yeah. I'm getting, man. So it's just a great family heirloom. I'll never get rid of it. So it's a great gun.
That's
So anyway,
awesome.
let's go on to the next question. I'll
Yeah.
send you a picture, man. Um,
Yeah.
Mike P. This was my first year hunting. Can you and Rodger explain shooting at angles such as up or down? Question mark. Okay, such as up or down. I shot over a deer this year that was below me, and I don't understand what happened. So I'm assuming he took a shot on a deer that was down the mountain or whatever,
Mhm.
and missed somehow. I'll let you take that one.
Um, and it's a trigonometry thing. Your line of sight versus the actual distance that gravity is having an effect on the bullet. So with archery or rifle stuff, it's all similar as far as you have to take a cosine of the yardage. And it's never going to be, so if your rangefinder doesn't account for it, and even a lot of the times with a lot of the rangefinders, they're not exactly 100% accurate on their cosine, but it's close enough that depending on how steep the angle was and how far it was, he shouldn't have missed that bad. But you're always going to be.
It would help if we knew how steep it was and what the yardage was.
Yeah, that's always hard to kind of speculate, because there's not a whole lot of places. You're going to run into a lot more of it with archery stuff. It's shooting out of a tree stand or shooting in a lot of these higher angled stuff through tree stands. But my buck in October was at a 14-degree downhill, and that was 440 yards. So let's just do the ballistic calculator real quick. So at 440 yards, I was 6.5 minutes, so almost 1.9 mils of elevation, calculated with that angle. So without that angle, just at 0, I would have been at 7 minutes. So half a minute difference at 440 yards, so quarter of a mile, is not that much.
Yeah.
That's 2.5 inches, 2 inches. So you're not missing over. And that was a pretty good downhill. And that was 14 degrees measured with my rangefinder.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when I'm rifle hunting my rangefinder, I have it set to give me the line of sight distance and the angle cosine, so I could put that into my ballistic calculator, and it's a little bit more accurate doing it that way than the true horizontal distance or arc or whatever your rangefinder calls it. But it's like I said, depending on how steep his angle was, 14 degrees, 20 degrees. That's not uncommon to get,
mm-hmm.
especially in Idaho. But it's not also going to throw your shot off too much. So if it was 20 degrees, it would have been about 27 inches of elevation correction. If it was 0 degrees, it would have been 32. So that's 5 inches difference at a quarter of a mile with my rifle set up. But you're still hitting the deer. You're not missing a deer with a 5-inch difference. That's most people's wobble zone,
Yeah,
so
you're still in there. So you saying you think more or less that sounds like that would be kind of more of a user error kind of thing. Maybe the shot wasn't as good and as
it's right. And I don't know the guy. I would have to have some more questions to really kind of dive into this. I would wonder how long or how often he shoots. Does he practice on shooting, different angles? Did he verify his data? A lot of guys will zero their rifle at 100, but because they don't have an accurate system to measure, whether it's a magnetospeed, lab radar, or a good chronograph, the actual muzzle velocity. So they'll take, it says, it should be at 2,900 feet per second on the box of ammo. So they put that in their ballistic calculator and print a sheet out and slap it on the side of their rifle and call it gospel, when they've never actually shot at those distances that they have the data for, and to see if it's on, because I guarantee you it's not going to be. I've never taken that data and first round impacts. I shouldn't say never. Hornady Ford off is really, really accurate because it's not a prediction. It's not a guess. They actually track the path of thousands of these bullets shot at these velocities, and they have the ballistic curve built in. It's not a cosine of a theoretical curve kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just geeking out there. But I would
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say,
don't know what his shooting platform was. Was he off of a tripod? Was he off of his knee? Was he prone? What, because you could get into, like I said, a lot of that wobble zone where your crosshairs are coming on and off the buck, and you're trying to time it, and then you mash that trigger when you think it's going to be there, and sent one. And I don't want to throw my dad under the bus, but he missed his first shot on his buck this year. I had it ranged at 300 yards, gave him the data, and he missed over the top of this buck by, I got the video of it, he probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 10 inches above the buck, clean miss. And it went just a little ways. And I told him, I'll dial to 250 instead of 300. And he just absolutely squared this buck. But just the data difference of 250 and 300 isn't a whole lot. And it isn't enough to have made that much of a difference. So I think he just airmailed that first shot. But,
yeah.
Because at those distances, there's not a whole lot of.
Yeah, I think with this question, there's so many variables. There's no way to answer this. Really, honestly, I don't know that we can answer it just because there's so many variables. And for those of you listening too, by the way, on some of this more technical stuff that Rodger's talking about, don't worry, you're not alone. I have no idea what some of that means either. Okay, next question, Daryl G. Okay, zoom it in a little bit so I can read it. Hey, Jim. It'd be cool if you read this on the podcast. Hey, well, Daryl, your dreams are coming true, brother.
Okay, there it is. Yeah.
Love your show, especially when you drink whiskey and get irritated, LOL. Oh, thanks. You had to throw that in there, man. That only happens every once in a while. Okay, question is, I live in Dallas, Texas. What would you guys recommend for me to get my shooting up to snuff for the mountains, since where I lice, well, I'm assuming he says meaning where I live is super flat. Okay, so let me reread that since I have more clarity. I live in Dallas, Texas. What would you guys recommend for me to get my shooting up to snuff for the mountains, since where I live is super flat? Yeah, that's definitely a Rodger question, man. What do you say to that?
Practice positional shooting. It's very easy to go to the range all the time and either shoot off a bench or shoot off your belly and prone. And this kind of goes back to that other guy's question too, is when he zeroed his rifle, was he prone? Was he, seated? There's, there's a good podcast. It's called, there's a bunch of good podcasts, but it's called The Straight Dope podcast with Chris Way.
Oh yeah, I started listening to that after you and I talked last time. It is a good one.
He geeks out on that stuff, and I love it. That Modern Day Sniper, just effing send it. There's a lot of good, kind of more PRS driven, Precision Rifle Network or Precision Rifle Shooting stuff. But it's good because they talk about positional shooting, because they very rarely shoot off their belly. But the Rifle Craft, if you go to riflecraft.com, and that's craft with a K, you can get these targets. He calls it, I think, this craft challenge. I'm looking at some targets right now. They have you shoot, build and break. So one shot, break your position, get into another position, one shot. So you do standing, kneeling, seated, prone. Each one shot from each of those positions, get back up and do it over again for a total of 12 shots total. So 3 shots from each position, but 1 shot in each position at a time. And it shows you on this target, like, what your expected zero change is and zero shift. And you could track this on his website. You could see your progression as you do this more and more, and you get better and better at it. You could see how tight your groups are getting, because I guarantee you zero your rifle on your belly, and unless you have really good fundamentals, that if you try to shoot seated or kneeling or standing, your zero is going to shift. It's going to be off because of the way that rifle recoils under moves under recoil. And so shooting positionally, getting a good zero, and this goes back to the other guy's question, is not getting Yeah, I'm around the dot. I'm talking getting a good zero, like I'm 2/10 of an inch low and 3/10 of an inch left.
Yeah.
And then putting that into your calculator, because that makes a difference. But having a good zero prone and then doing a lot of shooting in these different positions will help, because there are times that you can get prone in the mountains of Western or in Idaho or Wyoming or
For
Montana,
sure.
wherever. But there's also a lot of time, like my dad's bear. Both of my bucks were off a tripod. My dad's buck was off the tripod. I couldn't have gotten prone in those areas. And so if I didn't have a tripod to shoot positionally, I could have tried it, right? I could have tried to build a hasty position and shot off of my knee or off a backpack or something, but
Yeah.
you are never going to be as stable as clipped in to a tripod and just rock steady.
Yeah.
And so, having a good tripod and not, one of these ultra light things that could barely hold up a pair of binoculars because they're so skinny, like get something that you could shoot off of. I mean, you're saving yourself a world of hurt. You can glass off of it, you can shoot off of it, and you're just going to be a lot more successful. So that's what I'd say. Shoot positionally and make sure your rifle is set up with a tripod able to shoot off of.
Awesome. Just a few questions left here between the one I've got and your. I'm sorry, I'm kind of keeping you. You okay on time, man?
Oh, dude, yeah, I'm good. The wife and kid are asleep, so
Okay.
I'm in the garage drinking a beer and
there you go.
doing nothing.
There you go. Okay. So, John T. Would be awesome to hear back in episode tonight. Been listening for years. Trying to get right to the question here. Hey, you're welcome, John. I appreciate that comment, by the way. I didn't read that. Says, I love what you do and teach. It has helped out in my hunting, and that's awesome. Cool, John. What would be best or easier to use MOA or MRAD for someone that wants to be able to have the option to shoot long range or close? Full disclosure, Rodger, I have no idea what he's talking about with those, so... Also, where can someone start to learn to shoot long range? Well, we talked about that already. So, summarizing, what would be best or easier to use MOA or MRAD for someone that wants to be able to have the option to shoot long range or close?
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
MOA is minute of angle, and MRAD, as it's called, or mils. It's just another version of an angular measurement that is used for shooting. MOA
I knew that. I was just testing you.
Yeah, I know you did. MOA is a finer adjustment, but you're also, talking in quarter, half, 3/4, 1, versus MRAD, mils, whatever you want to call it, is tenths. So roughly a tenth of a mil is like a third of an MOA kind of thing. So and don't quote me on, there's going to be some guys that blow me up for this, but roughly for somebody to be able to just visualize and look at it. So a tenth of a mil is generally what you get as an adjustment in a scope. And that is moving your reticle up or down or left or right a third of an inch at 100 yards, as opposed to most MOA scopes are a quarter of an inch. And MRADs are usually, they're in meters or centimeters versus meters, but you don't have to do conversions anymore. They're back in the military, they used to have MOA turrets and mil dot reticles because they had there's a bunch of ranging formulas as far as, a known target size and how many mils it is divided by all these numbers, and it gives you the distance. And so they were able to then get their data to dial for distance. We don't have to do all that. So I would really say whatever they're comfortable with. A lot of people would rather think, like I had on my data for that buck, I actually had an MOA scope on that rifle at the time. And then between like the 2 weeks between that buck and my November buck, I'd switched scopes to an MRAD scope. So I go back and forth all the time. But
Which is there one? Is there one that you think is easier to learn?
No, they're all the same, mechanically the same, and most people aren't a good enough shooter to shoot the difference in those.
Gotcha.
As far as like MOA being a finer adjustment, most people aren't that good of a shot to, or shoot far enough to really have that come into play. But it's remembering smaller numbers, because with like an MRAD scope, say my data at say 500 yards is on this rifle is 2.5 mils, so 2.5, versus in MOA. Let's see here. Did I say 500 yards?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be 8 3/4.
Gotcha.
But so most people it's easier to remember or think about 2.5 versus 8 3/4. It just depends on how you do it, and a lot of it is too what your buddy shoots. If you guys are sitting there talking, or he's trying to talk in MOA, but your scope is in mils, and it comes into more so for windage. It's like, hey, I think it's a 10-mile-an-hour wind. Hold 7/10 right, and they're going, well, shit, he's talking mils, so I got to do this conversion in my head real quick. Oh shit, what so it's easier to talk back and forth in whatever. Like when I go out with Chris, his scope, everything's in MOA, regardless of what scope I have. I'm able to talk to him in MOA because I go back and forth so much. But if you didn't, he couldn't talk to me in mils. If I have my mil scope and I asked him for what his windage call was, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I try to talk to him in miles per hour for the wind. It's usually a better way, because then people can. And this is something that Chris Way gets into with your gun number as far as windage. And I could geek out on that and go on that for a while. But so I just want to answer this guy's question. But it's dependent. They're all the same. Your scopes nowadays, your reticle is going to be cut for the same thing that your turrets are nowadays. There used to be differences back. I actually have that scope. I shot that buck in October. It's mil dot reticle, MOA turrets. So I had to on the fly convert for windage and stuff, the difference of MOA and mils, and it could get confusing if people don't do it. But nowadays, every scope that I know of that's produced is all the same. Your windage and elevation turrets are all for either mils or MOA, and so is your reticle. So
sweet.
It really depends on what they want to talk back and forth to their buddy about or can think about.
Okay. Thanks for the question, John. That actually wraps it up for my questions, but you had a couple that came in on yours I just was able to pull up here. Okay, so pulled it up. Hunting ain't easy. Man, that's Mike, right?
I forget his first name, but he's a California guy.
Yeah. He's a great dude. I need to get him back. He was on the show a couple years ago. Mike, how you doing, brother?
Oh, okay.
Okay. So how much weight can I save with SA versus STD or Magnum action? And then the kind of a follow-up question is 6.8 Western the perfect caliber?
So he's talking about the first part of that question is short action. So short action rifle length versus a standard or Magnum length action. So standard would be like your 30-06 length, 300 Win Mag, and then you can get into the Magnum length actions or the Rum length actions super long. So
sure.
Generally, I have more experience with long action, which is also known as standard length, or short action, and you're only saving, say, if you just got a Remington 700 action, you're saving about 3 ounces between the two, which ain't much. I don't have super light weapon systems. The 6.5 PRC that I was carrying around in October and November was almost, it was like 12.5 pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty heavy, man.
And so I like a heavy rifle.
It's a damn Civil War
dependable. Right? The heavy's dependable. Heavy's easy to shoot. Heavy doesn't recoil as much.
Yeah.
Like there's so many pros to a heavy, and I can lose weight somewhere else. And I'm not Brian Barney. I'm not, well, I was going to say Brady Miller, but he carries a 14-pound rifle. So, but these guys that are going counting every ounce and cutting their toothbrush in half, and I'm not that kind of guy. I carry extra stuff. I carry extra weight, especially in like first aid stuff. But so I don't count my ounces like that. So that 6.5 PRC was actually on a Remington long action. It is now, I rebuilt it back into a short action, but you're only saving a few ounces. You're looking at, like, for Remington long action, it's like 30, I want to say like 35, 36 ounces. But then you can get custom actions like the Defiance Anti-X action, which is a steel action. It's not titanium, but it's like, don't quote me on this, but it's like 24 ounces. So you're like saving 10 ounces on the same length action, going to a custom action that they flute and they do all kinds of stuff to it to lighten it up.
Yeah.
Or titanium actions that are down there in the mid to low 20s, low 20s, I think, for some of the titanium actions. But you're spending a lot of money to save 6 to 10 ounces. These guys will get super lightweight rifles and then throw a 2.5-pound scope on it. So
and that there,
you could save.
Your argument with that is that it's not gonna justify the rifle. The scope is too much for the rifle in terms of distance and capability.
Yeah, and you're going to spend thousands of dollars to drop 6 to 10, half a pound to a pound off of your rifle. For people that are really trying to get the lightest weight rifle you can, you're going to be spending thousands of dollars to lighten that, when you could take that money. These are probably the same guys that want a super lightweight rifle and they're going to spend all this money on it, but then they're going to still carry around a 15-degree synthetic sleeping bag that weighs 3.5, 4 pounds when they could buy a down bag that's half of that. And you're going to lose right off the bat. You're going to spend $300 and lose 40 ounces versus spend thousands of dollars and losing 6. And when it comes to and that's why I carry a heavy rifle. When it comes down to the end of the hunt, like, that is the only thing that has to work, or I go home empty-handed.
Yep.
Right. Like, and so generally when you get into light stuff, you start losing the dependability because they're taking material out of places that wasn't necessarily designed to lose that material. So you start getting fragile. You start getting thinner walls on your scope tubes. Your turret systems are less robust. You start that it's a give and take. It's no free lunch. So you're gonna lose. You got to lose something somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm not about losing the weapon system.
Have you ever weighed your pack?
Yeah, I do, and I'm always 8 to 10 pounds heavier than Chris is.
Really?
But I also, I don't think there's a hunt that I can remember that there wasn't something along the road where Chris is like, oh man, this happened. Oh, here, I got this, to fix it, or an extra something, or, whatever. But
I've never even weighed my pack, man. I think you get to a point sometimes when between hunting and my days backpacking, and then I was in the Marine infantry where you took everything on your back, you get to a point where what's necessary and what's not necessary. And you just go with that. And I've never weighed a pack, man. I've never even considered weighing a pack.
The times that I weigh my pack is when me and Chris are going in together and we're sharing things, whether it's like we're sharing a tent or a stove. And so we're like, all right, we want to make sure we're both evenly heavy going in. So it's like, oh, hey, I'll take this and this. Okay, then that way we're starting off the same. And it's not like, oh, I get stuck with a tent and he's got the stove and I'm, 8 pounds heavier than he's going. So we try to share the load. So that's why we weigh things out. But
gotcha.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Same thing. I carry the necessary stuff to keep me safe and to be effective. And wherever that lands. I build rifles to shoot, and where they land in weight is where they land in weight. You could save weight in, like, I got 7, 8 ounce muzzle brakes. You could buy a titanium muzzle brake from Salmon River Solutions and cut 6 ounces right there.
Sure.
So if you're worried about saving 6 ounces, but you're trying to take like one of these quote short action magnums, like he's talking about, like the 6.8 Western, it's technically could it be a short action magnum because of the cartridge overall length, could technically fit in the short action, but it's not comfortable. You're limiting yourself on seating your bullets out long, and heavier bullets to come. So if you're worried about saving a few ounces on the short action versus a long action, get a long action and get a titanium muzzle brake.
Yeah.
And there you're money ahead there. So, but the next part of his question is the 6.8 Western.
Is the 6.8 Western the perfect caliber?
So that's the 270, 277. It's a modern 270 Winchester short mag. But 6.8 is another. Millimeters versus inches is kind of a thing. But that's where that comes in. And they didn't want to call it because it's so close, because the Winchester came out with it and Browning, and it's so close to the 270 WSM that they didn't want to call it the 270. It's just is a marketing thing. But anyway, I like the cartridge. You could think of it as a 270 PRC, very similar to the 6.5 PRC in cartridge design and whatnot, chamber designs, but in 270, playing off of the heavy for caliber 270 bullets that are coming out. Your 165s, 170, 175s, and probably more to come.
Mm-hmm.
But my problem with that cartridge right now is availability of bullets. There's a lot of, because it.
Oh man, tell me
heavy for caliber 270 bullets are fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Like 270 Winchester's been around forever, but because of the twist rate on that, it's really designed to shoot 130 to 150 grain bullets. So that's really what was ever developed for the 270 until fairly recently. And I just had a guy hit me up the other day, and he's like, dude, I cannot find, these 165 AccuBond long ranges anywhere. Yeah, you're probably not going to. So there's a very limited amount of these heavy for caliber, which is what you get that 6.8 Western for. You don't get a 6.8 Western to shoot 150 grain bullets.
Yeah.
You get it to shoot the 165s, the 175s. And so I like the design. It's just there's not a whole lot of bullet selections to justify it for me right now to ever really consider for myself as a good viable option. Just because of how much I shoot, I can't. I shot this 6.5 PRC. I shot built and shoot 600 rounds just from June to October. And if I'm not able to source bullets and brass and everything else for that, I wouldn't be able to do what I want. So I try to pick a cartridge that I could find reloading components or ammunition pretty readily available.
Yeah.
And just right now, there's factory offerings out there for 6.8 Western, and for a while, that's all you could see on the shelves because there wasn't a whole lot of people with guns with it, but there was a lot of ammo out there.
Yeah.
And I think that pendulum has since swung in the other direction, where now you're not seeing that ammo on the shelf, and more people have those rifles. So I do like the 277 caliber bullets. It's kind of that sweet spot between a 7mm and a 6.5. So it's I like it. I just don't know if it's quite there yet. I think in 5 years, it'll either have caught on and there'll be a lot more bullet manufacturers. I'm waiting for Hornady to come out with a 165 or 170, 175 grain, ELDX or something, and it's just not there yet. So,
gotcha.
You're a few years away from that, I think.
Well, let's wrap this up with the final question. I know I've got you. We're an hour and a half into this so far, and we'll kind of roll from there. By the way, guys, thanks to everybody who submitted questions. I know I didn't get to all of them that came in, but we're trying. We'll get. But I feel like what I did with the questions that came into me is I tried to select the ones that I felt like would have the most impact for the most amount of listeners. Some people had really specific questions about, certain things that I would, answer questions to them but not help anybody else kind of thing. So if you have those questions and still want to get those answered, definitely, which, by the way, Rodger, did you like how I wrote that? I learned the term slide into my DM. Yeah. I learned it yesterday. And so when I posted the thing asking, hey, send me a message or slide into my DMs, my wife's like, you're such a dork. You're such an idiot. Why would you use that phrase? You don't even know what that means. I'm like, what are you talking about? You told me yesterday.
You're that dad that tries to be hip around the young kids,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So now every time my wife, she's been asking me questions today about this and that, getting stuff ready. I'm like, you know what? Slide in my DMs later, and I'll let you know what I think. So now it's just driving her crazy that I learned this new phrase.
Now you have to keep on doing it.
Oh, totally. I'm gonna drive her nuts with it. So. So anyways, the last question here is how to choose the right scope or rifle. Oh, I was going to say, if you have some of these more technical questions, Rodger, is it okay if they slide into your DMs and ask you some of these more technical?
Man.
Okay.
I love answering these things. I geek out. My wife hates that sometimes when I'm
I could tell, man.
You're back so much, but I really enjoy it.
You are light years ahead of me when it comes to technical rifle and caliber kind of information and technologies and stuff. So every dude like me has to have a buddy like you, man. So how to choose the right scope for a rifle? There's going to be a lot of varying things with that one and a lot of different opinions with that one. I don't know. How would you answer that, Rodger?
Yeah, and like I said in the beginning, these are answers in the world according to Rodger. My opinions only, right? Nothing is gospel. But it's, I would follow up. I would try to ask some follow-up questions on something like that. Like, what's your rifle capabilities? What cartridge are you shooting? What areas are you hunting? What do you expect to do with this rifle? What's your...
The way to answer that is so, like, are we talking about a 30-30 lever action, right? Versus, a 6.5 Creedmoor or something? Yeah, there's so many different... Yeah. I guess I say that...
I got a
go ahead.
Oh, it's just, I got a 16-inch Ruger Gunsight Scout. It's the only factory rifle I have, and I'm not going to throw the same scope on that as I am on my 6.5 PRC. I just don't... I don't have the same, expectations of that rifle as I do the other rifles and cartridges. So that's a big loaded question. And on backwoods.pursuits.com or on their YouTube page, me and Gabe went into, I think it's a 3 or 4 part series on rifle scopes and kind of choosing those. We go into the weeds if somebody wants a little bit more in depth, but I would choose the right scope that is what your expectations are for that rifle, right? Like, I'm a big fan of first focal plane scopes because the subtensions on the reticle are always going to be the same. And I don't like shooting at full power on my magnification if I don't have to. But with a lot of second focal plane scopes, or all second focal, most, I shouldn't say all because I'm sure there's some out there, but most second focal plane scopes are all, their subtensions in the reticle are calibrated for the maximum magnification. So that's your windage holes and things like that. And you can figure out where the half point is in your magnification to make those subtensions exactly half of what they were at full power, but that gets into a lot, right? But I want to, if I say my wind hold is 0.7 of a mil at 500 yards, I don't want to be on 18 power shooting at something at 500 yards because when your rifle recoils, you have more tendency, depending on your position, to lose the animal, your target, in the recoil of the weapon system before you get back in. And so that's when you see these guys on all the shows they shoot and then they look over at their guide and they're like, did I hit him? Where'd it go?
Yeah.
There's I really like Randy Newberg and what he does for the hunting community, but I just watched his mountain goat hunt, and it's a great film if anybody wants to watch it. But I want to say he missed this goat like 6 times.
Mm-hmm.
And he was shooting at a really awkward position off of some hasty stuff, I think off of his pack and off some sticks. Didn't have a tripod, which I wish he would have. That would have made that shot a lot easier. But, because of the angle, because of the position and that rifle recoil, he didn't see where his impacts were. And so everybody's saying, hey, you're a foot high and a foot right. And with being able to see that under recoil because you got your scope dialed down, you're able to make that second shot adjustment. You don't have to ask because you see where it hit.
Yeah.
And then you can just, because he hit the same spot like multiple times. So it wasn't like he threw one low, threw one high, he missed in the same general spot a bunch of times. So if he was like, all right, that first shot, that was a bad trigger press, work on it this time, Pallison's another one, hits the same spot, maybe something's off on his scope or just the way his rifle's recoiling. So Kentucky windage that sucker, come down to the left, and but if you don't know how far off you are, it's hard to do. So I like first focal plane scopes for that, generally the 3 to 18, 3 to 15 kind of a power range. But it's if I'm hunting thick timber country up there in North Idaho, like that's not the best scope for that. Second focal plane scope in the 2.5 to 10 range is probably best. Better on the low end. Your reticle being a second focal plane scope at that is going to be a thicker reticle, so it's going to be easier to see in those quick pop shot type of situations. So it's just there's
Dude,
there's a lot.
You are a damn wizard, man. So. You're just a wizard at this stuff. Like some of this is just a foreign language.
I geek out.
Yes.
I absolutely geek out on it, dude.
I'm so old fashioned or something. I'm not old fashioned. I don't think that's right. I think I'm such a simpleton. I get a rifle and throw a scope on it and I go out and I shoot it and I shoot it and I adjust it and I shoot it and I adjust it and I shoot it. I shoot it so much that I'm pretty good with it, but I have no idea what some of the stuff you're talking about.
But that's Jim.
I wish I had the discipline to have that kind of knowledge that you have, though. I really do. This
is new stuff, though, Jim. This is it's not like this has been 15, 20 years. Like a lot of this stuff there's been so many good advancements with rifle scopes and everything.
Yeah, there has.
Just in the last 5 to 10 years that. Yeah, I've been lucky that I have some buddies that geek out on this too. Then we just bounce ideas back and forth with each other. So,
well, think about Rodger. Like 20 years ago, a term that you heard frequently when you're talking amongst hunters is Kentucky windage. You said it. Yeah. You said it tonight, and I was thinking it earlier. I don't remember what you were talking about, and I just thought to myself, man, I'd probably just Kentucky windage it at that point. But that's not a term you hear very often anymore in comparison to back in the day when like during the 90s, everybody talked about you got to be good at Kentucky windage. It was like a highly technical term back then, and now I think the necessity is just not there with the technology and the way, like you said, the way the scopes have advanced. I mean, I bought a cheap Leupold scope for my daughter's rifle, that little 7mm 08. And gosh, what was that? like $250 maybe. And it's a dang good scope, man. Like it's a freaking good scope for $250. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Yeah, I'm blown away.
There used to be a thing where everybody would say like, spend $500 or spend twice as much on the scope as you spent on the rifle. Like that used to be a thing when everybody would talk
People
about
still say that
for rifles. Yeah, but that's old, that old dogma of,
Mm-hmm.
you had to spend at least $1,000 on a scope because those were the scopes that tracked. When you're using those turrets, they would track appropriately and return to zero, and they were reliable. Not just the cap turrets where you just set it once and left it.
Yeah.
And so you had to spend that kind of money to get that kind of reliability to do those things, but you don't necessarily have to do that as much anymore. And so there's a lot more options out there that are quality options for that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
No, so I was going to say too, there's the whole old school, new school Kentucky windage versus the other stuff. Back to the Randy Newberg thing. So there's a great kind of a contrast between that. Like I said, I don't want this to sound like I'm poking at Randy because he's just has done so much for the hunting community, and I love the dude. But the difference between that and if you go on Modern Day Snipers YouTube page, Kalen Wojcik goes on a hunt it's a cull hunt for I believe it's mountain goats in the Grand Tetons, if I remember right. And he has a tripod set up. He's a former Marine sniper, instructor at Gunworks, like does their own instructor. Like, if you want to geek out on long range shooting and positional shooting and all that stuff, one of the best out there at that. But he shoots a goat at 700 plus yards, if I remember right.
Dang.
Off of a tripod, like, wind and everything, and hammers it. Versus, Randy's 6 shots at sub 400 yards. But the difference is Kalen's comfort behind the rifle, his training and experience, and just the sheer different setup that he had in the rifle system and whatnot. Yeah. So, they both ended up getting goats, but it's a good video to watch because there's two different, and this is where it comes down to what they want out of their rifle system and the world according to them, because there's no right or wrong way. It's just, what are you looking to do? Like, I geek out on this stuff. So some people just want to zero their scope for 200 and that's fine, man. I love it. Yeah. Go out there and hunt. But for people that are trying to stretch the limits of these things, these types of systems, those are two good videos to watch to kind of contrast both of those different hunting styles and shooting styles.
Well, I love it, brother. We need to wrap this episode up. This has been awesome. So much information has come out of this, and I always like having you on the show, Rodger. It's always a good time. I always learn.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's great, man. And don't ever cheat on me again and go on one of the other Eastman's podcasts because no, I'm kidding.
Congratulations, by the way, man. I never did actually tell you over the phone. I know I sent you a text or a message about it, but congratulations with that, dude. That's huge.
Oh, thanks, man. No, it's super exciting. I appreciate hearing that. So, yeah, I've been a big fan of Eastman's for a long time. So, but let's do this again. I mean, as always, man. I kind of like having. I have a handful of just revolving guests that I just always like having on the show, and you're one of them. So, let's plan on this again in the future, and maybe, I'd love to get you up here for a bear baiting hunt, and that'd be a ball at some point. So we'll have to figure that out. So stick on the line for just a minute.
We might have to hunt swap.
Yeah. We can definitely do that, man. Yeah. I'm totally game. So, again, thanks for coming on. For those of you listening, thank you for sending in the questions, and I hope you got a lot out of this episode. And remember that this whole thing that we call hunting is if it's a new experience for you, if it's a new adventure for you. This is the kind of stuff you should be listening to and talking about and really diving deep and educating yourself on how to become proficient in this craft, because that's what it is. It's a craft, as you could hear by listening to Rodger. There's a lot of different approaches and there's a lot of different ways to practice this craft. And there's an endless amount of information that you could learn, and it's all up to you as to how you apply that and what you want to learn, because it's up to you what you want to get out of hunting. And I think that's amazing, and that's why we do it. So, Rodger, again, thanks, brother, for coming on, and let's talk soon.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Thank you.
You made it! That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram at The Western Huntsman and write us a good review at Apple Podcasts. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on